Hello everyone, welcome to another video. So, I was working in Barnsley yesterday, had my camera along with me, and I thought it would be nice to get some shots, and now I'd like to see in post just how different the look of Canon's own software, Digital Photo Professional, is to Lightroom. This does not apply to JPEGs, obviously. JPEGs have their look. It's a great look, but we're going to be looking at the RAWs today. So I've imported this photo here and it's set to neutral, all right? So now we're going to go and take a look at Lightroom. Same photo, and this is neutral. Camera neutral. So this is basically Lightroom has made a load of camera matching, so-called camera matching profiles, which are meant to do the job of basically taking your RAW to where the JPEGs are. So on Canon cameras, you have your, these 5 settings are like ubiquitous on the Canon cameras, and Lightroom basically does this job of trying to interpret the image and tune it to these profiles that Canon includes. But you can see here they've not done a very good job, I don't think. And granted, they have to do this for thousands and thousands of cameras, so you can't expect it to be perfect. But if you think that you can just import a RAW photo into Lightroom and set it to neutral and it's going to look the same as the JPEG, unfortunately, you're mistaken. You can see here there is a big difference. So let's just have a zoom in, right? So you can see the Digital Photo Professional, I'm going to call it DPP because it's a bit of a mouthful. DPP looks to me the same as the JPEG. The leaves have this nice piney, aquary sort of colour that the neutral profile gives you on the 5D. It's the reason a lot of people use neutral profile for JPEGs, because it's got like that. It's got quite a pastel output, and this is preserved nicely in DPP. The greens especially look very natural, and they just, like I say, they lean slightly towards that kind of piney colour, which works lovely for this kind of scene. I'm going to focus on somewhere with a lot of shadow, all right? So we're going to go back to Lightroom. Look how much of a milky... There is a milky quality to this that doesn't seem to exist here. Here it seems like the blacks... the deepest blacks are actually black, and the highlights are highlights, right? You go into this, and immediately it's like, okay, we've got some work to do. If I pull this down, you can actually see it starts to break up, and there's some weird stuff going on there. You see that? It's like posturizing in a strange way. We did that on Photo Professional. Bring that down. None of the same problems. Quite an extreme move, taking all the shadows down. I think Lightroom probably gives you a lot more control with these parameters, but I don't know what's going on there. It doesn't look great when you've got parts of your image there that are basically blown out and they're not coming back. That's just doesn't look very good. I really hope this is translating to YouTube. I'm going to do an extreme zoom just so we can get around YouTube's compression a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing. You see how the date is there, and it's gone, right? Like 8-bit style, just gone. And the same thing in Photo Professional. I don't think I'm going to zoom into there anyway. But you see the point I'm trying to make. The camera profiles in Lightroom, for the 5D anyway, do not hold up very well. So what I've actually started doing is just using the Adobe Color preset, which hilariously looks a lot more like the neutral, right? Yeah, the greens are a little bit more fluorescent in Adobe Color, I think, and the yellows are definitely a bit more fluorescent. That's a much nicer palette, no question about it, but I'm going to zoom in and do that same thing we just did. moving the blacks down, 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 and you can see no breakup, or very little breakup. It's it almost seems like there's some technical issues with the profiles and how they are managed here. So it would be great to see some more profiles released that more closely resemble the Canon ones. But yeah, so Adobe Color really has been my go-to for a while now, as well as the VCSO presets, or VSCO, I can never remember which. They do have some nice looks. One of my favorites is the Portra 400, right? Which they've got like a standard one, which I find a little bit too dense. This one just has a slightly more matte finish to it, a little bit more pastel. So we'll compare this look, the Kodak Portra 400 minus, to Digital Photo Professional. It's a little bit different. I think the greens, actually, of the Portra 400 are a lot more accurate than Adobe Color. They've got a bit more of a look to... there's a bit more of a tint to the greens and the blues, and obviously there's some calibration in the color. I think all these hues, if you go along, they have, they're all a little bit different than standard, but the look that you get is a lot nicer to the eye, I think. This is not like an advert for VSCO. I just think, sometimes it's nice to have presets to work from, and yeah, I like this particular pack. I think Portra 400 minus is a lot cooler, whereas Portra 160 is a bit more yellowy and a bit more earthy, shall we say. And I've used a few of these presets actually throughout these photos. So I think one of the hardest jobs a camera can do is accurately represent green. As soon as your greens tend to look normal, the rest of the image kind of falls into place a little bit, I think. Another colour that potentially even harder than green to represent well is masonry, especially red brick, which we have a lot of in the UK. So I'm going to get a photo up here of some red brick. And this is actually... I was halfway through grading these, but I'm going to put that back to Adobe Color, all right? So that is 0677. Let's find that. There we go. So 0677. You know what? Let's pull up the JPEG. That's quite interesting. So this is the JPEG, which was shot using the neutral profile. No other changes to the profile other than I think there's a bit of sharpness added in camera. And you can see straight away the difference. And we'll go to neutral on this as well. So there are some differences here. It's actually slightly less obvious than the other photo, I think, but you can see that even on the JPEG, actually, the red brick kind of it definitely doesn't look quite as good as it looked in real life. Okay. And there's a bit of tweaking that I had to do on some of these. The neutral on this photo, anyway, is not as far off as I thought it was going to be, but we still have the problem with the complete loss of detail when you start messing with the contrasts. So I'm not going to use that profile. There is a color fidelity pack, which I also I bought that a while ago, but there are certain colors that it really suffers with. Let's have a look at that. Color fidelity medium, color fidelity standard versus neutral. Color fidelity can look nice. I think it's not very good on most photos. I mean, those greens are too... I'm going to use the word fluorescent again for my for my liking, and it might work on some photos, but I think the colors are a little bit strange, which is weird because obviously it's going for maximum color accuracy. Just gonna have a look at some of the other presets we've used. Portra 400, that's your Portra 160. Fuji 400. You can see that it really doesn't know what to do with that red brick there. It's it doesn't look filmish, and it doesn't look like what it's trying to do is working. So, yeah, I think, let's have a look at this one. Or is it that one? Can't remember. I think it was that one. So I used the Portra 160 preset with this, but I actually went into the color toning part of Lightroom and just adjusted some of these hues because I felt as though it wasn't working straight out of the box. And these are changes. So that's the normal preset, and then that's my little change. It's just very hard to work with red brick. It never seems to look right once you start changing things. This is Adobe Color. Looks fine, but it's a little bit kind of... I might just change the white balance a bit, see if that fixes things. It's fine, it just doesn't look amazing, you know? And a lot of that is always... having the tint right is such a big jumping point. You know, once your tint is looking okay, and obviously your temperature as well, you're half the way there, really. I know a lot of people like this teal and orange kind of look, which I've never had much success with, actually. I'd like to be able to do a good orange and teal grade, but this just looks wrong. See how it looks on the greenhouse. Not too bad. Not great, but not terrible. We got any other photos that we can really analyze? These are quite interesting because it shows the roll off of the 5D. I would say, actually, this is one of the most perfect exposure choices that I've done for this kind of scene. I'm not saying it's an amazing photo or anything like that. I'm not saying it's particularly interesting, but we are obviously in shadow in the foreground. The subject is in shadow, and the background is highlights with the sun on it. And you only have a very, very small margin to where you can expose for the foreground, but the background of the photo is completely blown. There's a good example here where, yes, I've exposed for the tree here, the subject. The background is gone, right? I don't think you could bring... yeah, most of it is completely gone. So you're then left with this almost like cut-out look, which is a bit strange. So if I go back to the tree one, wherever it was, I think what the Canon 5D does really nicely is when you hit this perfect balance, right? You get this extremely milky transition into highlights, and it works amazing in portraits. You can imagine if you had like a family in this scene and you had a little flash set up, but the background remained the same exposure. Just how nicely that works. You know, you've got like not a lot of other cameras I've seen do this, where it's this kind of flattening off the roll off, and it's very, very filmic in this situation. It really does look very filmic. This one as well, the greens are just stunning in these couple of photos. I think it's probably just the lighting. That doesn't look right. Let's use the same preset on this one. Not much change. A little bit. It's definitely a bit more pleasant. So this is what I shot the picture at. Most of the time with this camera, I do expose to the right, as you are meant to do with a lot of these older Canons, just to get as much signal to noise ratio as possible. Things tend to go wrong quite quickly when you underexpose this camera, but sometimes you have to. This is straight out of camera. Nice enough image. Let's have a look. Where are the flowery ones? Okay. Yeah, let's pull this one up. Wow, standard really pops there, doesn't it, compared to neutral? How about faithful? Yeah, I would say faithful lets some colours come through a little bit more. The pink really likes to come through. Got landscape, which actually looks alright there, but I usually never go with landscape. Portrait, again, I think because it leans into the magenta with the skin tones, you know, it looks quite nice there. And neutral, as shot. Where was that photo? This is the same one in Lightroom, but with my film pack added now. One thing I've noticed is that whatever's going on there is a bit strange. Seems to be some like strange sort of like blobbing around the bokeh. See if we can... No, I think that's something to do with the preset there. Does not like the bokeh. The actual colours are quite lovely, really. Very, again, like the piney greens really work. I'm going to go back to Adobe Color, I think, for that. Have a look. Adobe Color, and then let's have a look at Standard. Standard's pretty close, actually, you know, looking at it at a glance. I would say DPP looks brighter for some reason, straight out of the box. This looks like the whole thing's crushed down a bit. Like there aren't any true highlights there. Whereas there are definitely some nice highlights there that would print straight away and look like normal. I think that you have to do a bit of a tweak. Maybe the whole thing could just kind of come up like that. But yeah, let's go back to the picture of the actual house. This was a real struggle to get to look anywhere near kind of normal. I think I actually did blow this out a little bit too much. What you find with the Canon 5D is that the difference in, you know, a third of a stop either way can dramatically change the way the color palette actually comes out. It's not just the brightness. An overexposed photo grades completely differently to an underexposed photo. And I've not experienced that as much with later Canon models. Don't like my grade there, really. I don't like it. Let's see what we got. Go with camera standard, shall we? That's looking all right, to be honest. Find that photo right at the top. So many photos. Wow. Digital photo professional, this is horrible. Trying to scroll through all these photos. I tell you what. Can I do that? That's better. I think it was this one. So standard. I think, yeah, it's slightly overexposed, is this? It would look better if it was like a third of a stop less than this. I actually, There's not much in it, but I almost prefer this rendition compared to DPP there. See how it deals with the flowers. That's always quite an interesting one. I think that's a bit overexposed. Again, a bit overexposed. Let's go with... That's quite nice. Very strong colour there. That's a nice photo. Completely changes when you go back to Adobe Color. That's, yeah. By the way, guys, this is not a scientific, analysis of anything. We are just literally pondering on some files. And I don't really know what the takeaway is going to be for you guys, but it just gives you a bit of a look into how these cameras edit, because there's plenty of photos on people going, oh, this camera has a look, it has a film thing. This is actually the files. We all like that film look, but the same preset isn't going to work on every photo, and sometimes this camera can just look outright bad, but it's almost always a user error. And that is probably the frustrating, but what I love about the Canon 5D is that every time you get a photo that sucks out of it, you're like, oh, damn it, I know I've got, only a small margin of exposure, and if I'd have nailed the exposure on that shot, it would have looked amazing. And that is what is rewarding about this thing, You can get a Sony nowadays, you barely even need to think about exposure. You've got, 15 stops of range at your fingertips. But what you get in Lightroom is then quite a generic looking image where you can pull it in so many different directions that it doesn't really have its own stamp, This thing, when it's right, it's so right. I'm not saying that any of these photos qualify as like, I think these ones here is like, this is a perfect example of a great looking 5D image. We looked at this one earlier. And yes, they are graded, but if I turn off the grade, you can see it's not really that much different. The greens, again, slightly more fluorescent. Let's open that file in DPP. Eventually. There we go. I think it was 792. Just look at that. Yeah, I definitely think it gets the greens a lot more. You see, in this image here, DPP, the greens all have a relationship to each other. They all look like part of the same thing. There's a bit too much separation in this image here with the greens. Let's try it on camera neutral. Compare that quickly. yeah, you know, the colours are almost there, almost. But I think the real problem with the colour profiles, as we've discussed earlier in the video, is the fact that we've got true blacks here, we've got true shadows. You go into Lightroom, and everything is like has this weird inky musk over it, where it like should be a proper shadow here. And as we discussed, you just get these strange glitches when you actually try and compensate for that and put them in. You know? Works a little bit better when you use the tone curve as opposed to just reaching for the sliders here. Compare that. A little bit better. I think we've actually overcorrected there. But yeah, you can see how much easier the detail is to see here, right? In the shadows. Even though it's a dark area, it's easier to see. Over here, there's just a bit of a kind of lack of contrast, a bit of a veil over everything. You can kind of edit to compensate for that, but it's definitely nice that DPP gets it straight away. Let's open up the JPEG. God. Trying my best here, guys. But yeah. There is basically no difference between these. I think the JPEG actually does have a little bit of a color shift. But I mean, it's pretty negligible. So DPP gets these profiles like as spot on as you could wish for. So if you want the Canon 5D look, so to speak, you're going to want to use DPP to retain that kind of color palette that the JPEGs have. This, you're nearly there, but you're left to your own devices a bit more. Some of the presets really lean into the look well. Like, I think that is really nice. And others are horrendous. I mean, that literally looks like I'm colorblind. So, you know, that's me, my Portra 160 preset. Compare that to the JPEG. So, yeah. Like I say, guys, not in any way a scientific sort of video. I'm not going to claim to know exactly what I'm talking about with all these things. You know, I'm a hobbyist. You know, I don't work with any companies. I'm not trying to sell you anything other than the fact that, you know, obviously most of the presets I used in Lightroom there were VSCO, but I just think personally they're a good starting point. Don't stick with these presets for every photo because they're not going to work. You know, you definitely want to develop your own style. But yeah, I just wanted to basically give you real world examples of using different software and how the 5D kind of translates, you know, how RAW can change the color palettes and what you have to do to compensate for that. So yeah, thank you for watching. Not even sure if I'm going to upload this one, but yeah. If you stuck with me, thank you very much. See you again.